What if a peculiar question, a sentence that sounds surreal yet subtly hints at a deeper unraveling within the brain, was the initial sign of dementia rather than a forgotten name? Often dismissed as mere aging or a joke, families frequently recall these moments as the true beginning. The brain doesn't always betray memory first. Sometimes logic, language, and self-awareness subtly erode. The earliest red flag can be a question that feels just slightly off. This video unveils 9 strange questions seniors may start asking right before memory loss becomes apparent. Quiet signals that something is amiss long before dementia is suspected. Let's start with number 1. Are you sure that happened? Glenda, 77, began questioning shared memories. Her son would say, "Remember our trip to the coast?" And Glenda would respond, "Are you sure that happened?" It wasn't defiance, but quiet, genuine confusion. Photos existed, but the emotional connection was absent. She even once stared at a birthday photograph of herself and asked, "When was that taken?" 3 years after this shift, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Studies indicate that early dementia damages the ability to reconstruct episodic memories, those based on personal experience. Individuals may recall facts or places, but not the events involving emotion, time, or sequence. This disconnect makes shared memories feel unreal or fabricated. When the emotional thread is lost, even familiar memories can feel like stories about someone else's life. Number 2. Did I already ask you that? Clara, 71, known for her thoughtfulness, began repeating herself nearly 3 years before her early-stage dementia diagnosis. She would then catch herself asking with a nervous laugh, "Did I already ask you that?" This occurred during routine activities like breakfast, folding laundry, and even phone conversations. Sometimes she seemed embarrassed, other times simply annoyed with herself. Clinical studies link this meta-questioning, where an individual recognizes potential repetition, to an early breakdown in memory monitoring. They retain enough awareness to sense something is amiss, but lack the control to prevent it. This question marks a critical intermediate stage where memory is faltering, yet a degree of self-awareness remains, creating a fragile emotional space tinged with fear, shame, and confusion. Number 3. Did I always live here? 2 years before her diagnosis, Eleanor, 76, asked this question in her own kitchen. Her husband assumed she meant the town, but she was referring to the house they had shared for 40 years. The question resurfaced the following week, and again, while folding towels she had owned for decades. Eventually, she began expressing that the walls felt unfamiliar, as if the house didn't quite belong to her anymore. Large-scale studies indicate that damage to the posterior cingulate cortex, the brain region responsible for spatial and autobiographical memory, can cause individuals to question their location, even in familiar settings. This isn't about forgetting the route home, it's the unsettling feeling that home no longer feels like home. When even familiar surroundings evoke a sense of foreignness, it's a sign that the brain's memory anchor is weakening. Number 4. Was I always like this? When Henry, 71, unexpectedly broke down crying over tragic news, his spouse was taken aback. He had never displayed such overt emotion. Later that evening, he looked at her and asked, "Was I always like this?" He wasn't referring to the immediate moment, but to his entire personality. He then fell silent, as if the question had startled him. Henry was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia 2.5 years later. Scientists suggest that identity confusion often arises when the brain's self-awareness networks, including the medial prefrontal cortex, begin to weaken. This region helps us form a consistent sense of self. When these networks deteriorate, individuals may suddenly feel like strangers to themselves. They aren't merely confused about memories, they're confused about their own emotional landscape. These questions often stem from an unsettling inner sense that something fundamental is shifting within. Number 5. Am I acting weird today? Beatrice, 82, pulled her daughter aside one afternoon and asked, "Am I acting strange today? You keep looking at me funny." Her daughter was surprised as nothing seemed out of the ordinary. However, Beatrice raised the question again 2 days later, and then at a family gathering. She wasn't exhibiting paranoia, but seemed genuinely curious, even slightly worried. Her diagnosis of early Alzheimer's came nearly 2 years later. Scientific reviews confirm that some individuals experience an early decline in self-monitoring and sense it before external observers. They might feel off even when their behavior appears normal to others. This question isn't rooted in paranoia. It's the brain attempting to self-assess but struggling. When this becomes a pattern, it reflects an early erosion of self-awareness, a subtle form of cognitive decline. Number 6, where am I supposed to be right now? Arthur, 78, a meticulous man, suddenly posed this question to his wife while watching television. Initially dismissed as a joke, he repeated it at the market and even while resting in bed. It was as if an internal compass for time had begun to waver. For nearly 4 years, these unsettling questions surfaced until Arthur received an Alzheimer's diagnosis. Medical reviews indicate that temporal disorientation, a loss of awareness regarding time and place, is a primary early cognitive breakdown in Alzheimer's. This isn't about being physically lost. It reflects a brain losing its temporal anchors. When such questions arise in familiar settings, without preceding confusion, it signals a subtle yet significant shift in cognitive function. Number 7, do you think people are watching me? Approximately 17 months before his Lewy body dementia diagnosis, Walter, 79, whispered to his daughter, "I think the neighbors are spying on us." Initially dismissed as a joke, he continued to glance suspiciously out the windows, then unplugged the Wi-Fi and inquired if the television could hear them. Soon he refused to open the curtains or blinds, convinced of constant surveillance. Medical studies suggest that early paranoia and suspicion can emerge in certain types of dementia, particularly Lewy body dementia, and some forms of Alzheimer's. The brain begins to misinterpret normal sounds, movements, or coincidences as threats. This isn't delusion, but a misfiring of pattern recognition. These suspicions aren't random. They reflect a brain losing its ability to accurately filter reality. Number 8, is it normal to forget what you're doing while you're doing it? Joseph, 70, began asking this after experiencing brief lapses. Once, while washing dishes, he simply stopped, frozen, staring at a sponge. He later posed this concerned question to his wife. These moments accumulated. He even halted midway through tying his shoes, remaining still for minutes. 4 years after these initial episodes, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Findings suggest that momentary task disassociation is a hallmark of early dementia. The brain loses its grasp on action chains, sequences of behavior that were once automatic. It's as if the thread of the task vanishes mid-action. These micro-failures often begin subtly, but when the individual becomes aware of them, it's a critical early indicator of cognitive disruption. Number 9, why does my head feel empty? Almost 4 years before his diagnosis, Samuel, 75, uttered this during dinner. "I don't know what I'm supposed to be thinking about," he added. His spouse initially thought he was tired, but the phrase recurred. He'd pause mid-sentence, frown slightly, and say, "My head feels empty again." There was no frustration, just a quiet bewilderment. Eventually, he was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia. Research confirms that early dementia can disrupt working memory, the brain's capacity to hold and manipulate thoughts in real time. When this system falters, it can manifest as a sensation of mental blankness. These individuals aren't confused about specific facts. They experience an internal hollowness as if their thoughts won't materialize. This feeling of inner emptiness often precedes overt confusion or memory loss and can be easily overlooked. These aren't just odd inquiries. They reveal subtle fractures in the brain's foundation long before memory loss becomes obvious. A single strange question might seem insignificant, but when these questions persist and feel off, it's crucial to pay attention. By the time they forget what's happening, the brain may have been sending warnings for years.